My fiancé left me at the altar for my sister. 5 years later, I owned the company that signs his paycheck. My name is Josephine Caro, and I found out my fiancé didn't love me anymore, standing in a wedding dress, in a church hallway, 40 minutes before I was supposed to walk down the aisle. I'd been with Grant Ashby for 4 years. We met in college, built a life together slowly and carefully, the way people do when they actually intend it to last. Moved in together, adopted a dog, planned a wedding neither of us could really afford, but wanted anyway. My younger sister, Delphine, was my maid of honor. She'd helped me pick the dress. She'd sat with me the night before, painting our nails, laughing about nothing, the way sisters do. 40 minutes before the ceremony, Grant's best man found me in the hallway, pale, unable to look at me directly, and told me Grant wasn't coming. I remember asking why, my voice sounding strange and far away even to myself. He said quietly that Grant and Delphine had left together an hour earlier, my own sister, in my own wedding dress fitting room. Weeks earlier, she'd zipped me into that dress and told me I looked beautiful. And the entire time, she'd been building an escape plan with the man I was about to marry. I won't pretend the aftermath was graceful. I moved back in with my parents for 3 months, unable to hold a normal conversation without my voice breaking. My mother, to her credit, never once suggested I get over it faster than I needed to. My father simply sat with me some evenings, saying nothing, which somehow helped more than any advice could have. Grant and Delphine married within a year. I wasn't invited, obviously, though I heard about it through relatives who still spoke to both sides, the way families sometimes do even after something unforgivable happens. Grant took a position at Ashby Consolidated, his family's mid-sized logistics and warehousing company, positioning himself over the following years as the heir apparent to his father's business. I want to be honest about something. For the first year, I had no plan for revenge. I simply had grief, and slowly, underneath it, something harder and more useful beginning to form. Not a plan yet, just a refusal. A refusal to let what happened define the rest of my life as a story about being left behind. I had a business degree I'd barely used, having spent most of my 20s supporting Grant's career instead of building my own. I went back to it with a specific, cold focus. I took a junior analyst position at a private equity firm that specialized in acquiring undervalued regional logistics and warehousing companies, an industry I understood intimately, having spent 4 years absorbing every dinner table conversation Grant ever had about his family's business. I worked relentlessly, not out of ambition exactly at first, out of the simple need to have somewhere to put everything I couldn't otherwise process. Within 3 years, I'd been promoted twice, developed a genuine expertise in identifying operationally sound but poorly capitalized logistics firms, and earned enough trust from the firm's partners to be given real authority over deal sourcing. During this time, I learned, through industry channels rather than any personal interest, that Ashby Consolidated was quietly struggling. Grant, running day-to-day operations under his aging father, had made a series of aggressive expansion decisions that left the company over-leveraged right as freight demand softened regionally. None of this information came from spying. It came from doing my job well in an industry small enough that everyone eventually hears everything. I didn't orchestrate Ashby Consolidated's financial trouble. I want to be completely clear about that. Grant did that entirely himself, through years of decisions made without me, in a life he'd built specifically to exclude me from. What I did was refuse to look away from the opportunity once it appeared, the same way any analyst in my position would have evaluated any distressed company in our target sector. When Ashby Consolidated's board, under pressure from lenders, began quietly exploring a recapitalization or partial sale to bring in outside capital, my firm was one of several approached. I brought the opportunity to my partners myself, disclosing my personal history fully and transparently, exactly as professional ethics required. My managing partner, after a long pause, told me the deal's merits stood entirely on their own. The company's core assets were sound, the leadership simply wasn't, and that if I could separate my personal history from professional judgment, there was no reason I shouldn't lead it. I could. I'd had 5 years to learn how. The deal took nearly 8 months to close. My firm ultimately acquired a controlling equity stake in Ashby Consolidated, restructuring its leadership as a condition of the investment. Grant's father stepped back into a limited advisory role. Grant himself, whose aggressive expansion decisions were directly responsible for the company's distress, was moved out of his operational leadership position entirely, retained only in a reduced sales capacity, because completely severing him risked unsettling long-standing client relationships during an already fragile transition. I sat across from Grant during the final integration meeting, in a conference room he'd once run as heir apparent. I didn't gloat. I didn't bring up the wedding or Delphine or any of it. I simply ran the meeting the way I'd run every other deal in 5 years, professionally, focused on the numbers and the path forward. Near the end, as people gathered their things, he said quietly, "I never thought you'd end up on this side of a table from me." I told him, "You never thought about me at all, Grant. That was always the problem." I didn't say it with cruelty. I said it because it was simply, finally, true, and I no longer needed him to understand it for it to be true. Grant left the company entirely within a year, unable to accept a diminished role in a business he'd once expected to inherit outright. I heard, through the same industry channels that had informed me of the company's original distress, that his marriage to Delphine grew strained not long after. Though I don't know the details, and have stopped needing to know them, I don't feel triumphant, exactly, even now. I feel steady, which is a feeling I genuinely didn't believe I'd get back after that hallway, in that dress, 5 years ago. I built an actual career, a genuinely respected one, not as revenge, but as the only honest response available to me once I decided grief wasn't going to be the whole rest of my story. If someone has left you at your most vulnerable moment, publicly, humiliatingly, in a way that feels designed specifically to make you small, I want you to hear this clearly. Their certainty that you'd stay broken says everything about their imagination and nothing about your actual capacity. Grant and Delphine built an entire life assuming I'd remain the woman crying in that hallway forever. They never once checked whether that assumption was true. Give yourself the grief you actually need first, fully, without rushing it. Then, when you're ready, build something so undeniable that nobody's cruelty toward you ever gets the last word again. Thank you for listening. If you've ever had to rebuild yourself completely after someone you loved chose to destroy you instead, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below.